Afternoon, everyone. Let's try that again, because this is a panel about cartoons, which are joyful and fun things. So, afternoon, everyone. Hey, that's much better. So, it's such an honor to welcome you all to Macondo Festival this afternoon, and especially as a draftsman to be here amongst two of the most revered pens on the continent and the world. We have Gado, who is a revered and renowned draftsman who's critiqued our republic, as well as always keeping a keen eye on global politics, and his colleague and comrade in arms, Zapiro, who is also such a giant when it comes to telling the truth to power. So we're going to have a panel this afternoon called Drawing the Line, Laughing at the Scavengers, and we'll be kind of sketching their history, starting at the beginning, what inspired them to get into cultural critique and art, and they'll also walk us through their portfolio as we do so. I'll be your host. My name is Naddya Adhiambo Oluoch-Olunya, and I am an animator and musician, and I run a studio called Nalo Studios, and it's a true delight to welcome you to this conversation this afternoon. So we'd like to start with Gado. As we were prepping this festival season, one of the things that you mentioned was that your mother was one of your earliest champions, inviting you to get training as an artist as early as Standard 5. So as we go through your portfolio, could you tell us about those early years? Next slide. Next slide. Linda, next slide. Next.
Habari zenu? Thank you, Naddya, for putting this together. It's been a frantic 1 week, 2 weeks, but thank you so much. Thank you, Jonathan, for being here. I think this is about our 8th panel together, probably somewhere over the years. So it has always been fun and enjoyable to present together. Yes, I was pretty much privileged as a kid, but I also sort of like, I came to appreciate that much later in my life, because I think when I was growing up, it was always like normal. I mean, my mom could see, she was a primary school teacher, and she could see early on that I had this gift. And she hooked me up with a university of Dar es Salaam's lecturer, who I could borrow his paintings, copy, and when I was about Standard 5. And I continued that. And during my secondary school years, I was sent to a school that didn't have fine art as a subject. And there was only one school in Dar, as a near secondary school, that had fine art as a subject. And so she went, unknown to me, she battled it out at the ministry and put a case and insisted that, you have to transfer this kid, my boy, to and I didn't know, one day I was given a letter that, you have to get transferred. And for the last 3 years of my A-levels, I studied fine art, and that also helped to hone my skill. And so I look back, it's only when I started working and also started to realize actually how important that was, because at the time I didn't, and I thought it's normal, it's okay. But I think, yes, in that sense I was very privileged, and it really shaped my early days. And I think I personally started contributing to newspapers when I was in Form 1, I think in the children's pages, and by, in Form 2, I was also contributing to magazines and all that. So definitely that shaped my career in a way, but also, it was quite a privilege, because you didn't have that with as many kids, or I don't know anybody who was as privileged as I was. Yeah.
Wonderful. Like, having mothers to champion you is such a gift. I know from experience. Shameless shout out. My mom is in the audience, and she's also one of my champions who also encouraged me to pursue draftsmanship. So since this panel is called Laughing at the Scavengers, the next image we're going to show is a really bold swing at one of the globe's largest political giants. Could you tell us a little bit about this? What courage informed?
Yeah, so sorry. In a way, we start on a I don't know what not to call these ones. This was 2016, by the way, I think, when Trump was campaigning. And little did I know that actually at that time, I think I thought I was a little bit harsh at that time, but to be fair, I think I was it's quite apt, going by what was what is going on today. I think the next slide, please.
Next slide.
Yeah. So again, we are living in the age of authoritarianism and fake news and free press. This was, I think, May 03. I think myself and Jonathan also will show here that a lot of some of the stuff that we do, what is worrying and what is always that you find that they are sort of like repeating themselves. And I was trying to also look at the combination of rather the fake news, authoritarianism, and attack on free press, especially in the age of COVID-19. I mean, that we are living now through, if you are to look at the global politics. To the next one. Here, I think it's this. We have lived it. We have seen it. I think it is the attack of LGBTQ community. I think there was a time whereby I think anything rainbow was being attacked, and in Uganda, imagine Museveni, attacking the rainbow, because they would arrest even people wearing the rainbow colors. And so I imagined, because as a former gorilla, would attack the rainbow when it appears. Yes, and I think the next one is that this drawing was, it appeared on the East Africa, and as innocent as it appears, it actually got the East African banned in Tanzania for a year. I thought it was an innocent drawing, to be fair, but because it doesn't, an emperor with clothes, but from what I was told is that the President Kikwete was so annoyed with this that one, I wouldn't name who said the reason is that the cartoon was too close to the truth. I don't know what that means. because J.K. was always known as a ladies' man. So, and this is a recent one. I think we have been. We'll jump quickly. The Ruto, and then of course you all know what will happen. I think for those who do not know is that we have, the President Ruto is building a church at State House, and he has voted to build it with his own money. And in the midst of the Gen Z human rights and all that. And so I imagined that, the sacrifices that would go on, when it comes to building this church. And interestingly enough, you actually had religious leaders who actually participated in giving a go-ahead to this. No, sorry. yeah, this is the Gen Zs. It was after, I think it was June 25th, the very day that we had Black Tuesday. And I was also, by the way, in the streets that day, but it just demonstrates the power of the gun versus the power of the phone. There we go again. The complicity of our religious leaders. Again, what we are seeing today, I always like to go back, as you can see, this was, I think, 2017 when I did this drawing, but it is actually what we are seeing all over again today. And yes, we are living, I think one of the things as an editorial cartoonist is also sometimes very much worrying, because it tends to look sometimes like I do things, I don't know if, Jonathan, you feel that, is that I'm frustrated because, you know, I suppose the things that I do, they keep repeating themselves. And that sometimes worries me, because I do something, I said, but I did this 10 years ago. And I don't know if, you know, to me that is disheartening, because I would like to think that probably we would be moving forward. And so this is something that, you know, again, was 2008. And I know this, you know, about religious, both Christians and Muslim and religious leaders from both sides of the divide would always come to you, and we'll come to that later. And Jonathan also has interesting stories to share here. I did this in, I like to show this drawing in 2005, just before the Muhammad cartoons. And my idea was simple, was to, you know, at that time we had a lot of bombings that were going on, suicide bombing in the Middle East. And my argument was simple, that to say, I know that, you know, we know at least that the male suicide bombers, they get 72 virgins after their mission. And I was trying to find out, okay, what do women suicide bombers get? Because I thought, you know, I was being gender sensitive. That yes, you know, they ought to get something if they go ahead with their mission. And the nation had to apologize on its front page, because the soup came and all other leaders actually wanted to conduct demonstrations and all the way to... And I received threats with this. I think the cartoon had to be pulled off the internet, and I received lots of threats because of these cartoons. And Jonathan also had interesting experience with that. And okay, this was the emperor drunk with power. It was never used. The Standard did not want to use this drawing, but I think I was told later that, look, they were very concerned, but thanks to the internet, it was published online. And then, of course, we have, yes, China, the influence of China. Now, the Chinese are very sensitive to editorial, to cartoons and criticism. I don't know about South Africa, but I know for a fact a nation, I received lots of pressure, the nation received a lot of pressure from the Chinese embassy about my work. And I know also that, you know, luckily my editors, you know, protected me. And in a way, I have actually a collection of a few letters from the Chinese embassy that were very unhappy with my work. Of course, this is also another, what is going on in Gaza. And I was just to mention about, I've shown, they've done a lot of drawings on Gaza, but and Palestine. But one of the things about Gaza is that there is I was a contributor to the DW, Dutch Welle, and they pulled, the editor called me one day to say, well, they are concerned about your drawings, and, you know, they are deemed to be anti-Semitic and all that. I said, you know, and said, probably you might think twice about it. So I said, listen, our agreement is you publish what I do, but you don't actually dictate what I draw. And after a few months, the DW actually terminated my contract. They wrote an email to say, no, I think they will not be interested in, because my drawings were seen to be anti-Israel. And so I started by the drawing that we had all the cartoonists with guns, and it's an expression about what editorial cartoonists and satirists go through every day. And I think for those who have followed news, you have seen what is happening in the US. I mean, free speech is seriously under pressure, and whereas I'm still optimistic, this is for. Yes, but I'm still very optimistic about free speech. I think this is for Kenyans. This is the former.
Is that Anne Waiguru?
No, that is Anne Waiguru, former governor. With when he attacked the musician rapper King Kaka, when King Kaka rapped about this NYS scandal, and I know a lot of this. When it happens behind the scenes, there again, as I said, one of the luckiest things that I had, and I think is always this: the pressure that the newspapers go through. There's a lot of pressure that goes through behind the scenes, but most of the time you find also that editors have to deal with that. And I've said times and times again, despite my tribulations at the nation, but still I was always very much protected because of the newspaper would pick up the tabs when it comes to lawsuits and so forth. I've been sued a few times, and they would sue the artists, but also the newspaper, but the artists would be enjoined. This is Paul Kagame. Yes, I'm always accused that I don't do enough on Rwanda, but no, I do a lot on Rwanda. It's just that I'm glad I don't. I live there. I know of a story that I was told of the Rwanda Times. They were looking for the cartoonists, and I know a Rwandese journalist who said they thought, well, we need an editorial cartoonist. And I think there's an editor who said, well, Rwanda is not ready for Gado in this. We don't need an editorial cartoonist. So it's always fascinating that how satire, for me, gets under the skin of leaders. And the next one. This, as innocent as this drawing might appear, it is fascinating. This is a drawing I did. I remember I was in the US, and it is a drawing that I was mocking the United States of America travel warnings. And so I said, well, and I remember, I was actually traveling at that time. I was in the US, and so I posted it. Little did I know, actually, the Africa Union issued a statement to counter the cartoon. They looked at this as a true advisory statement, and they did. It's not a laughing matter. They did issue a statement to say, no, there is no travel ban again. So this is I also contribute to the continent, and I was looking at what is happening in Tanzania. However sad, I am Tanzanian, by the way. I have been living in Kenya for over 30 years, and I've been given all the tribes, all the Kenyan tribes, and I've embraced them all. But I've continued from afar, contributing to what is happening in TZ. And last but not least, again, I did this drawing recently for the continent, the cover, about Burundi. and the fuel shortage that is going on. Now, as innocent as it appears, the head of Annabelle in Burundi, who is which is the largest Burundian, rather NGO in Burundi, it's a Belgian organization. The head of the organization innocently posted this cover on his. He shared this in LinkedIn, and that very day he was given 48 hours to leave the country. And he had to leave the country for sharing this cartoon. And that was his crime, that the government seemed, the Burundian government looked at it and said that this is, the fact that he just shared on his LinkedIn and he was expelled. So again, it shows the power of satire and why free speech has to be protected at all costs. I will end there, but I just want to mention that it's good to see that the former President of the Supreme Court, Mr. Maraga, is here. It's always, for me, it's always fun to see some of your victims in the audience, especially if they're enjoying. There are very few with who actually, and who would take up, would come and accept criticism. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much, Gado. Before we go into Zapiro's presentation, we've seen that because of your courage, you must have made a lot of enemies, and you've paid a very heavy cost for your art. But as we go into a conversation with one of your most powerful friends, I'm interested, how were you able to survive it? Who are some of your colleagues in the arts who've kept you growing and kept you sane?
Look, one, I don't think I'm more courageous than my colleagues or anything like that. I think I've survived because I started working, I was very lucky to start working with the newspaper that protected me in terms of, whenever my drawings would appear or whenever there were issues and so forth. And so I grew up with that tradition and with that upbringing. But also, it's up to you. I mean, we choose to do what we do. And even today, I mean, you can't get arrested, you can't get, that threat is there. And so, but there are always, one of the things, I think, because we are armchair experts and we sit in our corners, and I think we are somehow insulated with, but also you have to make a point, as an individual, that this is what you do. And I always say that the only freedom I have and the only integrity I have is my office and probably that A4 paper, whatever size of paper I have. Now, that is something that I've never wanted violated. And in the sense I will guard and protect that with all I got. And that comes with the consequences. You have to understand that. So I don't go to interview journalists, or rather, politicians and all that. And I even tremble to the idea of meeting these characters. No, seriously, I don't fancy that at all. Because I'm also human. I can imagine if I'm invited to State House,
Will you come out?
I might, if for example, something is on the table, I mean, I might take it. But I try to avoid that situation. I'm only human. I have issues. So on that, I tend to also be careful and say, well, I've also been very lucky throughout my career.
I'm glad that you've been lucky, and we are grateful for it. Thank you so much for walking us through. And now we'd like to welcome your powerful colleague, Zapiro, to walk us through his journey from we're in for a treat. We're going to see some very, very early drawings from Zapiro, so we can see how he's grown and how those seeds of his draftsmanship were nurtured to the strong caricaturist he is today. Welcome, Zapiro.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to try and go through some of the early ones quite quickly, because what always happens is I always overrun. There's always so many things I want to talk about. But Naddya asked us to talk a little bit about our background and how we started. And I also owe a lot to my mother. So this is a little piece. I'm going to show you something later where this is contextualized further. At age 4, I had nightmares about monsters. My mother made me draw them. It was a kind of exorcism, more teeth. And I drew as many teeth and spikes and things on these monsters that I was dreaming about. The monsters disappeared, but I didn't stop drawing. So that's just a little cameo from a later cartoon. I did this when I was studying in New York. I'm going to just move on. And my school books were littered with these drawings. I did history only I didn't really do history as a subject properly later, but just in early history. And I just found myself sort of satirizing the stuff. I understood from a liberal household, not a radical household, in this whites-only era of apartheid. I understood the absurdity of, there was something that I was getting from my mother in particular, and from a couple of teachers later. But so you see the beginnings of a sort of satirizing the colonial history that we were getting, and was only a very, very tiny part of the history. I then started doing caricatures of the teachers. Now you'll see that I described myself yesterday as pink, or pink or white or whatever, but in apartheid South Africa, if you were at a government school, all your classmates were white and so were all your teachers. I mean, we were absolutely segregated. But I really enjoyed drawing the teachers, and I started to see the power of these doing these caricatures. I mean, my art teachers at school did not know what the hell to do with me, because clearly I had some sort of talent, but I wasn't doing the kind of stuff that they really liked. There's some more of these teachers. You see the one that got me into trouble, it was sort of early days of getting into trouble. Neanderthal man. This teacher absolutely looked Neanderthal, and I drew him, and unfortunately I was so absorbed in the drawing I didn't realize he kind of came up behind me and had a complete fit. I mean, such a thin skin, but that I realized is what people in any position of authority, whether it's just teachers with a bunch of students below them, or politicians or heads of corporations, many of them have got an incredibly thin skin. So he blew up, and I got into trouble, and I actually thought it was worth it. Then I didn't do art at school because the art teachers were so crap that they had no imagination. And one in particular, when we were choosing subjects, I was choosing whether or not to do art. I thought, I really want to do art, but I can't do art under this guy. And so I didn't. And then the next year, a fantastic art teacher came, and I unfortunately was doing other subjects. I got a lot out of those subjects, but I never studied art. I went into architecture to try and stay out of the army. In those days, young white males were forced to serve in the apartheid army. And I was trying to go to university to study something else so that I didn't have to go, and I didn't know what to study. I went to architecture. I wasn't really a great architectural student because my head was in cartoons, and I was starting to do cartoons for the left, but I wasn't really involved heavily as an activist. I did a cartoon of the head of the architectural school who had an Africanist program, but he also had this very, very clear affinity with kind of Western, sort of, he like a Stetson hat, and he liked American, he liked sort of California stuff and Texas stuff. So there was quite an anomaly with this Africanist program that was very dicey. Anyway, he was a good guy. His name was Ivor Prinsloo, but he absolutely freaked out about this drawing. And there I was, a second-year architectural student, not doing very well at architecture, but getting a hell of a lot of attention. He flipped out in public about this cartoon, which also looks incredibly innocuous to me. But it's amazing how these things affect the people that you draw them about. Okay, so I then unfortunately was unable to stay out of the army because I tried to change courses to do graphic design so that I could become a cartoonist. The army refused to give me deferment, and I suddenly found I had 3 weeks to go to decide whether or not to go to the army, or to leave the country, or to go underground, or to get jailed for 6 years. And I wasn't ready for that. Later in my life, I might have been. But 6 years jail, that's a hell of a sentence. So I went to the army, and while I was in the army, the United Democratic Front, the UDF, I refused to carry a gun. And the UDF began, which is an organization that I could really get my teeth into. And so I joined the UDF and immediately got arrested while in the army. And I just put everything into drawing for the struggle, drawing for this organization. This is a cartoon I did at the end of 1986 for a calendar. There's another South African artist in the audience who used to draw also in different style, but also lots of bright-colored things happening. Is the person, as I say, who helped get me involved in ideas and thinking and being against the system. She was detained without trial by the security police, and there, down in the bottom left is the one with long black hair carrying computer paper. That's my sister, my older sister, who was also detained by the security police because she had a PC, which in those days, when she was detained in 1985, not many people had a PC, and she had the database, and they knew it. So the security police knew she had the database of the United Democratic Front branch members. And then there, I'm walking into that. You'll also see Archbishop Tutu just next to above my mother. It's difficult to point here, and Alan Busak, and this was the feeling of the struggle in the Western Cape. So I'm walking in as well to the building with my sketch pad. But this cartoon was actually banned. It was banned for distribution because we applied for the reasons you could do that. For furthering the aims of a banned organization, of course, the ANC, you'll see flags, you'll see slogans, you'll see Mandela's name, you'll see Oliver Tambo's name. And the one more thing I'll say about this is that the mad guy up on the roof trying to lasso the helicopter is a guy whose name happened to be the same as mine, Jonathan Shapiro. And when I was eventually detained without trial by the security police in 1988, the first question they asked me, I don't know if you've seen that there are some pigs in this drawing. The police and the security police are drawn. The first question they said was, why do you draw us as pigs? And I said, I draw what I see. After which they put me in solitary confinement. Anyway, they then interrogated me about this. What they interrogated me about in 1988 was about Nelson Mandela's 70th birthday celebrations around the world at Wembley Stadium in London and the ones that were happening in South Africa. And they clearly thought I was on this committee. And I thought, oh, these people are very senior on this committee. I'm not on this committee because I was preparing to go to study in the United States. So I thought maybe it's Jojo, the other guy. He must be on the committee. They released us after Nelson Mandela's birthday. I went to study in the United States. I came back 2.5 years later. I saw Jojo at a party in Cape Town, and I said to him, hey, you know, they detained me because they thought I was you. So he said, oh, no shit, while you were away, they detained me because they thought I was you. So I said, okay, we're quits. Okay, so that's the cartoon that I have the longest to talk about. Now I'm going to try and go quicker again. This is me around that period, still in the army, promoting that troops out of the townships. I got involved in the End Conscription campaign to try and stop white youth from being conscripted. And there's a cartoon of P.W. Botha with his finger as a smoking gun. And so it was a very great period for me. Now I'm going to take you back to this, the piece where that little cameo came from. This I did when I was studying in New York, behind the barbed wire curtain. At age 4, I had nightmares about monsters. My mother made me draw them. It was a kind of exorcism. The monsters disappeared, but I didn't stop drawing. At 29, I was still drawing. There were other monsters to draw. And this is now me as a young activist, drawing, being watched by security police and by the reactionaries and people. I got beaten up on occasion. Oops, sorry, there's the next one. My drawings began to be seen in the townships. I held a well-publicized exhibition of cartoons. It was called Laughter in the Belly of the Beast. In Parliament, a cabinet minister launched an attack on resistance art, and specifically on people like, there were a couple of cartoonists that he attacked, me included. And I want to say to the perpetrators of this filth, we are watching you. One night, the security police came to take me away. Open up, artist scum. They interrogated me, but they did not discover my secret. They said, tell us what is in your head. The secret: monsters are not immune to exorcism. And there I had actually smuggled paper into my prison cell, and you're not allowed to take any paper. I had some, and I was drawing and writing. We actually did a card that I did a card which I tried to get to Nelson Mandela, who was still in Pollsmoor prison, in another section when I was there. And I got all the political detainees and prisoners who I could, about 5 of us, just to sign it, and we sent it via a warder who we thought was a little bit more tame than the others, but it got picked up by the security police, and it's disappeared. I've tried to find it. I'd love to find it, but I haven't. So, and now jumping to the day that we became a democracy, 27th of April, 1994, I represented Nelson Mandela as the sun, as the new dawn, as the enthusiasm for his, he represented both the struggle and the best of what we could become. There's our new flag and the old flag in the dustbin. I actually had incredible interplay with Nelson Mandela. He loved the cartoons. I've got lots and lots of stories. I don't have time for those. I'm going to jump already, because I have to go so fast. I'm jumping already right past the Mandela era to Mbeki's time. Thabo Mbeki was not a reconciler like Nelson Mandela, but he very talented, but I think he went a bit off the rails on a number of issues, including HIV and AIDS. Where I agreed with Thabo Mbeki was he said, there are 2 nations, which Mandela had tried to make us one nation. And there were at least 2 nations, and I agreed with Mbeki that there was still, that white people had not apologized enough, there were not enough reparations. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission had not really been listened to either by white people or by the new government, as it happens, in terms of getting reparations to people. So there was still a vast gulf. White people then said, many white people said, the National Party were lying to us. I was out of the country. I was too young. I didn't know what was going on. I never voted for the National Party, which it all wore a little bit thin. So I did this one: whites who never benefited from apartheid, which I always say is the best cartoon I've ever done on that subject. And it didn't take 2 seconds like it looks. It took me many, many, many hours, and I had lots of drawing and lots of writing and lots of text, and eventually I realized that just by having that white space there, every white person then and now, in terms of privileges, in terms of land, in terms of educational possibilities, in terms of network, even activists, by comparison with African black activists. I'm now lapsing into South African terminology of white, colored, African. It's so ingrained in us, but my black comrades were more likely to get beaten up or tortured or whatever than I was. So every white person benefited and still does. So that's an important cartoon for me. jumping right beyond the Mbeki era to the next era, where I had gone from being an enemy of the state and of state structures in the apartheid era to being a friend during Nelson Mandela's era, to being a comrade and a friend. Then in Mbeki's era, I started to be seen as an opponent again. And by the time it was Zuma's time, I was an enemy again. And Jacob Zuma was clearly corrupt. He was trying to, in this cartoon, he was trying to become president. And this is a cartoon which is shocking still. It's the cartoon I'm best known for. Jacob Zuma and his allies in the ANC Youth League, the ANC itself, the South African Communist Party, and COSATU. And it is what it looks like. It's a gang rape scene about to happen. But it's metaphorical. Go for it, boss. And what he's being incited to do, well, he's certainly a more than willing participant, is to basically rape the metaphorical figure. It's the justice system, or Lady Justice. It's not real. It's a metaphor, as cartoons often are. But all hell broke loose. He was trying to get the corruption charges that were hanging over him dropped so that he could become president, and he eventually managed to get a political solution. But in the week that this was published, everything went completely wild. I was attacked from on stage. There were a couple of the people in this cartoon who was shouting, "Who's the rapist now?" So what I should say is there was a court judgment in his favor, which was later reversed. And then they managed to get a political solution to actually have the corruption charges at that stage dropped. They're back again. But they're back years later, years after he stepped down and had to end his presidency. So this cartoon got taken to the Human Rights Commission, and they exonerated me. They said it in the public domain. It's about issues that are really important, and I was exonerated. But he also sued me. So he sued me twice. He was already suing me for the equivalent of $2 million US. And here he sued me again, because that was for 3 cartoons. And this is one cartoon where he sued me for just for this cartoon for the equivalent of $1 million US. It doesn't really make, these are world record amounts, but it doesn't really make any difference because he never saw a cent. Because both, he had to drop the charges. So in that case, in that sense, we won, even though, I suppose it was a victory. I didn't get anything out of it, because if somebody sues you, the main thing is that if you get a victory, well, they have to drop the charges, and in this case, they had to pay our costs as well. But as Gado said, I was supported by the newspaper groups for which I was doing these cartoons. So now I better move a little bit quicker. You see that he's wearing a shower on his head. He has a shower. That's a device that I have to say, this cartoon landed up on a list of 15 cartoons that changed the world, which I'm very proud of. And it's from cartoons from the last 200 years. But they didn't actually change the whole world. Thank you. But they were seen as cartoons that were important in the era that they were produced and in the society in which they were produced. The shower comes from a stupid comment he made when he was prosecuted for rape. He was on trial for rape. He managed to get acquitted, which is dicey. But he said he knew that the person that he had unprotected sex with, she said rape, he said consensual. He knew that she was HIV positive. And what did he do next? And he didn't think he was at risk, even though he'd been head of the National AIDS Council. And he said he had a shower to lessen his chance of infection. So the shower then became a fixture. And then the shower took on a life of its own when there were protests against Jacob Zuma. People made their own showers and came and protested in front of the government buildings and of Parliament, and I was very happy that I was sort of in that way part of the protest. So now moving even quicker through a whole lot of drawings now. South Africa's had huge challenges with energy, with electricity. We've had lots of blackouts and so on, and eventually they said, our power survey is called Eskom, they said they were going to appoint a technical task team. So don't panic. They've called in Eskom's technical task team. I thought, who might be on that team? ET's got his own like built-in light, and then there's the little minion trying to light a light bulb with a big lighter. Homer Simpson, and there's Mr. Bean and the Three Blind Mice and Dr. Seuss. Yeah, so exactly, we don't really have a lot of faith in that. But that's been an ongoing thing for many years. A recent change of events, ANC, as has happened all across the continent, liberation movements have, there have been some things that they've done that are good, and then they've often screwed up. People have become corrupt, and people have become, they've forgotten who they were fighting for in the first place. And we've had a mixed bag. We've had some very good things, and we've had a lot of that. ANC's fortunes have plummeted, and eventually they have to get into coalitions like a lot of places. And so last year, when we were finally in a coalition, it's a government of national unity. It's actually a coalition, but a government of national unity. So, oops, wait, where am I? I've got to go back. There we go. Yeah, so it was a chance to do a Lion King kind of thing, and but you know, there's that tiny little Simba in the Lion King, but in this case, it's a very big animal, a wildebeest. These days, I find a lot of people don't know that the new is the wildebeest. The government of Naddya, you know, I have to explain that now, but. It is the English version of the new, and there's Jacob Zuma still trying to sort of get power again, being held up by the hyenas. Okay, so the next, I felt that I don't want to show only the drawings that that have caused the biggest outrage. I just want to get into the thread. The last thread is the thing that's affecting the world the most, and that is that orange man up north. So there are a few cartoons about that. Non-Americans, millions of Africans, go get them. And that's an end to AIDS funds. PEPFAR, the President's Emergency AIDS Fund, that has been so important. Interestingly, one of the most progressive presidents, American presidents for Africa, was none other than George W. Bush, who we all reviled. I mean, little did we know what was coming. But, you know, he actually was pretty good, and he did quite a few things. And there were a number of things during his presidency, including really helping this emergency AIDS fund. And Trump is consigning people to death, really, by ending the AIDS fund. We had an issue with our South African ambassador, who was recalled because he told some truths about Donald Trump, and he was. Then suddenly we were trying to, you know, think who we could possibly send. So at last, a perfect South African ambassador. It says Marco Rubio, Trump, Musk. Musk was still in the picture very much. This is an homage to a famous cartoon about a headless soldier. At last, the perfect soldier. So I put that down at the bottom. But you'll also see that I don't do this lightly. I don't put swastikas on people, just any old people. But these guys are genuine fascists. And I've drawn them a number of times with swastikas on them. I mean, they are operating on a fascist playbook, shutting down free speech. And I mean, and ICE is like a fascist outfit. So when Trump and Musk, again, still in the same camp, now not, but when they started talking about the white genocide in South Africa, which came from some South African white groups who have some influence, they started. It's an absolute myth. There is no white genocide. There's no genocide against white people. There are some white farmers who've been killed, but actually the greatest proportion and the greatest numbers are by far black people being killed in South Africa. We have a very high crime rate, unfortunately. But this myth allowed Donald Trump to, well, allowed, he doesn't take, you know, he does whatever he wants. So he's invited white refugees, Afrikaner refugees, to come there. So when the first lot went, I did this one. Idaho welcomes white Afrikaner refugees. They look strangely familiar. They came from the far side. I thought they were actually very similar to sort of middle America, these white. So this cartoon actually, as mild as it looks, it really flew, because I think people South Africans really sort of understood that and beyond. And then, of course, the Trump tariffs and the bullying and all of that. There's one, just as we were waiting for our tariff to land, which ended up being 30%, which is it's absolutely crippling. There's the principal power monger. Next. And, you know, we are all treated like school kids around the world. Modi got 50% tariffs in India. Not that Modi's a great guy, but that aside. And there we were waiting for ours, which ended up being 30%. So one more on the Trump stuff, and that is a moment that I thought I couldn't miss, because when the Coldplay Kiss Cam thing happened, and I just thought, well, I can sort of change the personnel a little. Whoa, look at these two. And there's, you know, Epstein and Trump. I thought that's you know, you've got to use those kind of meme moments to produce something. And so this is one of the most popular cartoons I've done recently. The next one could be, in some senses, one of the most popular and also one of the most reviled. I mentioned yesterday, as a Jewish cartoonist, a Jewish South African, I am absolutely dead against what Israel has been doing, and never can we, of all people, be compared with Nazis. And what I try to do on that is to actually look at the exact comparisons. And it doesn't mean that it's 6 million people. It doesn't mean that it's all death camps and ovens. But what it does mean, dehumanization, ethnic cleansing, torture, kill 50 for every one of ours, collective punishment, target food queues, starvation policy, bomb hospitals, target journalists, target elderly, target children, genocide, and snipers kill for sport. I can verify every single one of those things. And that is absolutely Nazi. So the last couple of the cartoons are about something that's a real pain, and it's terrible for me as a South African to see South Africa, where the rest of Africa really supported us when we needed them. And there's been, because now people flock to South Africa to try and get some sort of economic help, even though we're having difficulties, there's been an increase in genocide. And this cartoon that I did now was drawn after a terrible round of genocide in 2008. And I did some very hectic cartoons. Then I did a sort of lighter weight one, the South African map of Africa. And then you've got this, it's proudly xenophobic. And you've got the whole country, the whole continent sort of relabeled. I can't go through all of these now because of time, but right in the middle, for example, is the Democratic Republic of Car Guard. Most of the car guards in Johannesburg come from the DRC. So these are the sort of South African versions of Africa. Down and on the side, on the west coast, there you've got better than Bafana, that's better than our soccer team, that whole bunch. And you've got that. Most of these have got the word alien. The southern ones have got the word alien. I'll just point out that on the top right there, you've got Ethiopia's Haile Selassie, and Eritrea is Fairly Selassie, which is a joke that I stole from the Goon Show from many years before. And the last two is one that could also be done around the continent and in many different eras, but it's from about 25 years ago. Gado had a cartoon of Mugabe. This was also Mugabe after one of his elections. Let the doomsayers see this turnout. That's the food queue. And that cartoon for me it's one of many that I've done on that kind of subject. But that's unfortunately a situation that we see a lot. And the last one I've got is an unlikely little cartoon, which I did when the British king was crowned, King Charles, all of a sudden, instead of Prince Charles, and they had the inauguration. The guests from the colonies took their stolen jewels back. Well, he's now got no jewels left in that, because all the jewels and all the riches came from South Africa and came from India and came from, and this has become a huge global issue. It was mentioned yesterday in one of the panels. And we need reparations for those. We need those things to be brought back to Africa, but we also need reparations for Africa. Thanks.
Wow, what a wild ride. Like, I don't know how all of you are feeling, but I feel inspired, I feel enraged, and I feel ready to invite you guys into the conversation. So we have time for 3 questions. Are there any questions from the audience? If you could get a mic in front.
I was talking with Zapiro earlier, but just with considering what's happening in the U.S. right now with Jimmy Kimmel, with Stephen Colbert, and the censorship of, I'm just right in front of you, with the censorship around comedy, around satire, just overall your kind of reaction to that. And then as we look at that, just how can we either pursue, preserve, or push to expand our civil liberties when it comes to freedom of speech, either from your perspective as draftsmen or from our perspective as an audience. What do you think around that?
As I sort of started to say when we were discussing those things, I'll elaborate a little bit further. Often I wonder what is the effect of a cartoon. As it happens, I didn't go the route of showing all the cartoons that have had the greatest impact, one or two of them, or that have reached the highest sort of power brokers and that. Because every now and then it happens. I had a cartoon, actually a lovely story and all of that, which got to the White House without my knowing in the early days of the internet. And I was utterly amazed that this had been doing the rounds in the White House. So to an extent, one can say that every now and then there is an actual cause and effect that you can see, but you know what can I do as a cartoonist? What can anyone do in their own professions? I think my sense about these kind of censorships is on a global scale it's very, very difficult. If somebody as powerful as Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert can get the axe or get somehow can find their career limiting things happening to them and all that. What can we really do? We can only do what we do, and I think it usually starts on a smaller scale. So like, what can you do? Rail against something that happened to Jimmy Kimmel? No, you work within your own environment in whatever progressive way you possibly can. Network with other people and try and be part of the groundswell that eventually does something. That's all that one can do. And sometimes you find that your local stuff then starts getting noticed and then becomes more national, becomes more international, and you just join with global networks. That's all I mean, what can we actually do about that actual decision? So that's my, sorry, in the second part of your question, I didn't quite get.
I think it's just to kind of either pursue, preserve, or expand our civil liberties with anticipation that, yes, while this happened in the U.S., that looking at history, looking at World War II, looking at the Cold War, just thinking about, even though that just happened in the U.S., looking at history, looking at World War II, looking at the Cold War, that is a strong indicator of those forms of oppression hitting us in other parts of the world as well. So what are kind of the tangible things that either us as an audience or you see yourself as a draftsman can do to ensure either the preservation or pursuit to expand our freedom of speech?
I'm probably going to find it hard to without taking up too much time, not to just say that the previous things that I've said are what we can do. I think to be more concerted about it is if you can possibly find people that you can actually network with, so you can work less as individuals and more as groups in whatever you do. So you do what you do as an individual, but you really network and really try and find those things. I mean, if you look at, as you say, the history, interestingly, Dr. Seuss, the great children's author who did a lot of kind of morality tales, as they're very, very interesting morality tales in his books. He started out as an editorial cartoonist in the exact era of of fighting fascism and trying to mobilize the United States to not sit on the sidelines, but to actually join. I mean, that's one of those fights that despite hating war, that's one of those things that had to be fought, or I feel, I mean, that's a subjective thing. And he, as a cartoonist, was doing that. So, and there would be other people in many different fields. Anyway, I think that's probably, yeah.
Gado, do you have a response as well as we look for a second question? If you can get a mic at the back.
Just, I think to add to that is that, yes, there was a recent study that was done in the US, and it was interesting that it focused on the late night shows, and it actually, I can't remember the numbers, but it showed the influence of satire in the United States, especially the late night shows, that people actually pay attention, and the people actually are influenced by satire. And now, if you are to take that, then it shows you why dictators, those of the right and those of the left, would always want to clamp down on satire. And this historically has been repeating itself. And so, to what we've been saying is that it is important that actually free speech is defended, at all levels in, using legislation, but also as a people. If you are to look, for example, in Africa and in East Africa today, I mean, there is an attack on free speech everywhere in East Africa: Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi. Attack on satire. All these countries have, in one form or the other, they've arrested satirists, writers, and cartoonists, and locked them in. As we are speaking, we have actually, a cartoonist from Burundi who had to run away, and we had to organize to help him actually to fly him to Nairobi, because actually you had actually the authorities in Burundi bumped him off in his car, and his car had to skid off, and he was actually had to be rescued. He had to go into hiding. Finally, we managed to get him here. So you can see, and sometimes it's all the big cases that are known that are, but actually there are quite a lot of cases that have been happening. Some not so many people have had, and so forth. So it is important that actually, as my colleague said, in every corner of what we are doing, where we organize, we have to defend that. We have to defend free speech. And I always, I said, the evils of free speech are lesser evils compared to the evils of banning free speech. So that's the reason. There is an argument on both sides.
Thanks for that powerful note, Gado. The second question at the back.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that very insightful panel, and your work. Oh, yeah. And your work is obviously very punchy, it's irreverent, it's bold. But I want to dwell a little bit on fear, and doing the work that you do in the circumstances that you do. Have there been periods of your life where you've encountered fear, or you've kind of lived under the shell of fear? And what does that mean? How do you navigate that? Yeah, and not necessarily in opposition to, maybe mobilizing with people or creating a community, because, yeah, what is it? Do you feel fear? Has there been a period of your life where you've kind of lived under the shell of fear? Yeah, thanks.
Can I take that to start? As it happens, there's something that has great relevance to my being here right now. A little thread that I wasn't able to include in this because I was trying to get the particular cartoons. I didn't show that one of the two cartoons that have caused, or three, the stuff I do on Israel and Palestine goes very big. The Jacob Zuma, the rape of justice, is big. And the third thing is that I am one of the cartoonists who has done a Prophet Muhammad cartoon. And I did it 4 years after the Danish Prophet Muhammad cartoon thing. I did it very carefully, and I thought I was joining a group of 17 cartoonists from around the world who had signed something saying that we should be able to draw what we draw. So now you have the situation where on the day that we were all meant to do it, who sat up and did one? Moi. And unfortunately, so I stuck my head above the parapet, and I was the only one around the world. I immediately had 6 death threats from 6 different people. I was really worried. A few weeks later, I got beaten up in public during our World Cup on a very public section. The fan walked towards and from the stadium. I was flown up to Johannesburg by my editors to try and meet the Muslim community, where we had this absolute conundrum where they said we do believe in free speech, but not about the Prophet. And there was security and helicopters. No, the helicopters weren't there. Everybody else was there. I was joking. I said, where are the helicopters? But there were guys in flak outfits, and there were guys talking into their sleeves, and it was unbelievable. So it sort of died down, but then in 2015, I was going to come to Kenya to a conference that Gado was involved in called, wait for it, Freedom of Expression and Security. And it was the interrelationship of freedom and freedom of expression and security. I said I thought that's fantastic. Then there was an attack on the university town up north. Yeah. And how many people died there? And yeah, over 100 people died. Al-Shabaab was active and all that. And I just thought, God, if I go, I described myself yesterday as pink, but whatever, white, South African, Jewish, cartoonist who's done a Prophet Muhammad cartoon. I'm sort of sticking 5 flags up, and I thought, I don't know if I can do it. I phoned Gado. I said, what's the security like at the conference? He said, good. What's the security like where I'm going to stay? Non-existent. I said, I'm afraid I'm going to, for the first time ever, I'm bailing. And I bailed out, 2015. 2 years later, I get a call from the police, the Hawks, that's the investigative department. They're not nice guys, but anyway, they called me and they had no good bedside manner. They weren't nice to me at all. But they said, we've intercepted a communique between some people in South Africa, some young people who'd been arrested in 2015, and an operative where in Kenya, saying that I was a target for assassination in 2015 at the very time when I was worried. And this guy was not Al-Shabaab, and he was not ISIS. He was Al-Qaeda of all things, which seems to go back to 9/11. But anyway, and that I could be taken out with small arms, explosive or poison. And so that shook me to the core. When the Charlie Hebdo thing happened in 2015 as well. So, and that's also for doing what I've done. So, yeah, there's a lot of fear, and if you want to go and do these kind of things, you just have to know that sometimes you do feel like you're taking your life into your hands.
Such a heavy cost. We have time for one more question. If you can get a mic to the middle, please. The mic should reach you shortly.
Thank you very much. My name is Garnet, and I'm Naddya's mom, and I have a question. Now, finally, I think within the last week, the UN has actually called what's happening in Gaza a genocide. Finally, I say. Now, when we got into this auditorium just before this session, I noted that the music that was actually playing through the speakers was Christian music. And Kenya is known to be about 80%, just over 80% Christian. Now, right now, in the Anglican churches in the country, the verse or the scripture that is being used, I think, for this month actually comes from the Exodus of the Israelites from Egypt. And I think about 2 weeks ago, they were talking about the parting of the Red Sea, the saving, of course, of God's chosen people, and the drowning, the righteous drowning of the Egyptian army that was following them. And I was listening to this and I was just wondering that, and yesterday we had whole sessions on history. How do we read history? And of course, for me, I always make the links between history and scripture, because a lot of our written story comes from the Bible. So I kept asking myself, if I am thinking of the Israelites as God's chosen people, and I'm looking at Benjamin Netanyahu arguing that he's fulfilling scripture today, how do I reconcile with the ways in which we think as Kenyan people about the huge areas of our lives like faith and belief, and how therefore do I begin to read what's happening in Palestine when, for me, I'm a literary scholar, so a post-colonial one, when I know that people like Edward Said was born in that part of the country, and that he had to leave and was never able to go back, but spent the rest of his life struggling for a Palestinian homeland. How do I reconcile all these things? And of course, yesterday listening to Zapiro, and again today make that joke to the pinkness, and I think of Rivonia and Mandela, and I'm thinking these issues, and of course Gado saying these issues, he's thinking 10 years down the line, he's not going to be talking about the same thing, but the ways in which we keep going back. But how do we liberate our minds if the original story is that one? That the Israelites are God's chosen people, and we believe it. How do we reconcile that? Thank you.
Shall I?
Yeah.
You go first.
You're Jewish, so you go first.
I'm Jewish. I'm chosen. I'll go first. Look, as I said yesterday, again in another session, I mean, you're looking at a Jewish atheist, a secular Jew, a secular humanist who believes that, accident of birth is how I landed up having Jewish heritage and a Jewish background. But for me, one of the interesting things that my mother said, well, my mother didn't say it to me in exact words like this, but what we got from my mother, who was a refugee from the Nazis. Her family had to flee Nazi Germany. She was born in Berlin, and they all got out just in time, where many other Jewish families I know were not as lucky as them. But she got out. They got out at the end of 1937. They got a whole lot of people out, which is quite amazing. And she never forgot that. Her siblings did. So my mother, I may be doing them a disservice, but a lot of Jewish people they kind of get to some other place, and then they're concerned about Jewish insularity, and this must never again, must never happen again. But never again is for everyone. And that's what my mother taught me. So when I saw things happening in apartheid South Africa, I said, well, this is also oppression, and so did, and I mean, I wasn't the only one. I mean, that we made that connection, but we also then made the connection to the Palestinians. We said, how can we, as Jewish people, support that kind? It took me a while to figure that out, but once I did, I'm passionate about that, and so there's a small but growing group of Jews in the diaspora who are starting to see it. Unfortunately, there's too many people who have the herd mentality. But to your question, I think there's one other thing, and that is that the sort of taking of things literally from biblical texts and that. I mean, I just wanted. There's a little rhyme or not a rhyme, a little saying. I can't remember who said it, but it goes, "How odd of God to choose the Jews." It's not that odd. The Jews chose God. And who wrote that stuff? I mean, who wrote that stuff? That was a bunch of people walking around the desert trying to find ways to stay in power. Religious people are politicians. It's human-created stories. They create their own stories. So then people, centuries and centuries later come and say, well, it's there written. Who wrote it? People wrote it. It's not written from the sky. So, if people then take that literally to justify a genocide, that's the ultimate crime.
Just to add to that, I think history is a funny thing. And it is interesting. In Kenya, when you start to argue about a discussion, we were talking this with a friend of mine, is that people run to the Bible. Now, running to the Bible without context, without history, then I think is an exercise in futility. If you look at actual history, the very Bible was used to justify slavery. If you look through history, the Bible was used to justify apartheid. So we have actually to also look closely as a people, at the situation in Gaza. There is no justification, none whatsoever. None whatsoever. And I think we have to stand up for that. It is, again, to add to that, if you look at actually religious leaders throughout history, you get the very same thing. The drawing that I referred of it's a simple drawing of the sacrificing Gen Z's integrity and so forth in State House at the altar of integrity at State House, in order to build a church. And you find it is the very religious leaders who are actually justifying that. Very, very religious leaders who are actually justifying the killing of Gen Zs, the killing of young people who went to protest. So I think it's a monumental task, but religion throughout the ages has been used to justify these acts, murderous acts, so that religious leaders can stay in power. And I think that we haven't seen the last of that, unfortunately.
Thanks for that. Unfortunately, we have to close. Okay, please be quick.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Dad. That's my dad.
I can't exactly come against that.
My question is very brief, and it was when you're drawing about sensitive or controversial topics, how do you decide how far is too far? Yeah, that's my short question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, as an editorial cartoonist, as a satirist, one of your role is to push the envelope, as the saying goes, and you have to push the envelope. So, yes, you have to go as far as you can, and myself and Jonathan here, we have also realized how far one can go. And most of the time, sometimes, it's only when you cross the line you realize how far you can go. Now, I must admit that I think as I grow older, I'm much more, much as I push, I have also a freedom of choice. And one of the things that I do is also I reflect on the impact of what I'm doing. because I also keep insisting, and especially in these parts of the world, is also, we have to admit, and this with time I've admitted, in many ways it's a privilege to do what I do, and I mean that in the real sense of it. It's that, you know, I have, to do what we do is also a form of power. Editorial and satirists, that's the power we hold, the power of the pen, as we call it. We call to account, and more often than not also, it is a power that actually, it's a privilege others don't. The fact that people know, look up and said, well, they can ask these questions, we can't. And so that is, over time, I've also learned about that. And that has allowed me to actually to have more impact in terms of what I do. But also it's important to know that pushing as far means that you also question the very society that you're dealing with. You have to ask the tough questions that nobody else is willing to ask. And in doing so, you will always cross lines. Cartoons and editorial cartoons are not there to please people. And I think that is also the problem. They are there to ruffle feathers. And there is a saying that, you know, if actually you know that probably you do not provoke people and people don't get mad at you, and if you are an editorial artist, probably you are in a wrong profession. You should get out of it, because that is part and parcel of what you have to deal with every day.
Okay. I'll try and be quicker than usual, because it's not my strong point. But I'll say that, first of all, one of the things that I try and do is that if I'm going to go really far, I must be very careful that I'm only punching up, not down. Because sometimes, let's say, with my irreverence towards religion, I'm against the religious demagogues. I'm against people who tell lies as religious people. I'm against people who align with wrong political, and it's subjective, but I'm against people who are homophobic and who are misogynist and who are promoting fake stuff on whatever it is, COVID or anything else, or fake news to stay in power. And if religious people do it, or politicians do it, or corporations do it, I'm going to try and punch up. I mustn't, along the way, hurt like ordinary. I mustn't make it look as if I'm really denigrating like ordinary people. It's the power brokers that I'm going for. So that's where, and then I will go really hard. And I also have to think sometimes, is it worth it? If we've got something that's just going to be so explosive, I don't want to do that on an issue that's not like that important. I want to go far, and really far, and further than other cartoonists will go. Just a few of my colleagues will also do it. Some people are just looking for kind of tame stuff. But I want to do that on the issues that matter, and then make those important, and then I will go as far as I possibly can, further than my editors want me to go, further than the lawyers want me to go. Yeah.
Wow. And with that powerful closing, I just want to thank you all for your attention. I want to thank you, Gado and Zapiro, for your courage and drawing the line for where most of us won't, and paying the price for it. So thank you. I know there's so many burning questions that you all have. Thankfully, they're still here. So please find them after the session. And the final thing I'll ask them to say is what they're selling. And so you can buy all of their work, starting with Gado.
Okay, so I have 3 books out there. One, Crisis, What Crisis, that came out after the 2008 crisis that we had, the near civil war that Kenya, got through. And there is also my new book that has come out, which is Gen Z versus Hustler versus Gen Z, centered around the issues of the last Gen Z protests in last year. And last but not least, Freedom After Speech. It contains essays and a collection of drawings that I did around the issues of freedom of speech. And it looks at to exactly what we are talking about. It looks at what happens. Because what matters is not freedom of speech. It is freedom after speech. What happens to you after freedom after speech? So that is what it looks at. Thank you.
And I have a few books out there. In short, there's one called Democracy, which is a title that I thought of, and then I thought, wait a minute, I've seen that somewhere before. And it was Gado. And I had to phone Gado and say, hey, listen, that's the best possible title I have for my South African thing. Do you think I can use that? And I actually thanked you in the book. He allowed me to use the title that he'd already used. So that's the one. And the other one is called WTF, and the F is a shower, and it's my fight against Jacob Zuma. Those are the large format books. And then I've got about 5 annuals, my annual collection. The latest one is Have I Got News for You? That's and then there's a few others as well. Thank you. We'll see you out there.
Thank you so much.
And thanks, Naddya. Thank you very much for trying to deal with the two of us.
Thank you. It was an honor.
Thank you, Naddya.